Preparedness. It's a word that has become a new part of American vocabulary. Since September 11, 2001, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and the 2012 tornado outbreak that decimated Henryville, Indiana. Uncertain times have led to fear and anxiety across the globe and have found a home in the lives of U.S. citizens today. But do we really need to live in fear? Hi, I'm Dave Snow, and you're watching Health Watch.
Welcome to a new age of health, a new age of health care. The time is now, so don't turn your head. Don't blink, for you might miss it. Become aware, watchful.
Disaster preparedness is a broad topic with many areas of study. What constitutes a ready level of preparedness? And more importantly, what are we doing as a local community to prepare for a disaster that could affect us at any time? There are several agencies involved during a disaster. Public health, law enforcement, and emergency fire and medical are just but a few of the agencies that converge during emergencies in places just like this, the Wayne County Emergency Operations Center. Today on Health Watch, we'll examine how these agencies not only prepare for a local disaster, but also respond to them, ensuring your health and safety and the continuing vitality of our community.
Well, I mean, 9/11 was the first time when something, when there was what I would consider a major terrorist attack on U.S. soil. And it really, for me, and I think a lot of other Americans, brought to the forefront that this stuff just doesn't happen overseas anymore. I mean, these are real things that could happen to us right here.
When the story first broke, we thought it was a traffic helicopter that had hit one of the towers. And then once we really began to realize the scope of what had happened, we realized that it was an act of war. And for people my age, we remember Vietnam, but that's back when we were little kids. You remember the Gulf War, but that's in another country, that's across the ocean. You don't remember what it's like to have a war here in the United States, and that's what that felt like.
Not only was it the realization that that could occur, but of course then there are the following thoughts of where else is it going to happen? Is it going to be in Indianapolis? Is it going to be here? Is it going to be more close to home? Who knows?
And I think it was a real eye-opener for a lot of people in the preparedness community who have been traditionally preparing for natural disasters and other preparedness issues, and it brought an entirely new element into things that we need to start thinking about when it comes to preparedness.
I think the unfortunate part of all this is that there are still significant numbers of citizens that think that it will never happen to them.
Well, it might happen, but if it does, the government will step in and take care of me. On the other end, you have the people who devote a lot of time and a large amount of their income to training and being prepared for an apocalypse.
There's two sides, maybe two extremes in the preparedness scheme. The 911 mentality, which is that I don't have to prepare because I'll call 911 and somebody's going to come and help me. Or the 9/11 mentality is that there are folks out here and we need to prepare for the worst.
I see all of them, because I teach hundreds of people a year here at Willow Haven, and they're all here for different reasons.
Our next guest says the most important thing you can do is be prepared to, quote, bug out. Joining us now is survivalist and author of the book, Build the Perfect Bug Out Bag, your 72-hour disaster preparedness. Creek Stewart, good to see you this morning.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks for providing the...
They're motivated by completely different things. Some people, they've just had a couple of kids and it's not about them anymore. and so they're thinking about their family. Some people, it's about pandemic. You know, some people it's about natural disasters. They have a friend who maybe died in one, or their family was in Katrina, or they've had loved ones in 9/11. Every single person has a different motivation.
What we're asking for, what we're encouraging, somewhere in between. Take reasonable steps to be prepared, both as individuals, as families, as businesses, as communities.
By educating ourselves and understanding how to implement those things, it takes us to the position where we are more proactive rather than reactionary. And I think that gets us to a position where we can say we are planning or we're preparing to be a survivor rather than waiting to be a victim.
Every night on the 5 o'clock news, there's some kind of disaster, natural or man-made, happening to someone somewhere in this world. Every single day. And people watch the 5 o'clock news and they see that. And then they turn on cable TV and they see a survival show on whatever network you flip on, or there's a survival game show, or they're reading about stories on the internet. It's just a culmination of survival-themed media. And you know, you couple that with politics and an unstable world economy, and people really start to think twice about, you know, is there something to this whole preparedness movement?
We're going to have some thunderstorms. We don't really want those.
Yeah, we're going to have some late night thunderstorms across Indiana, so don't be surprised if you hear some rumbles of thunder after 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't think you can be prepared, you can be over-prepared. You know, you do tornado drills and safety drills at school when you're a kid. A lot of people don't do them at home. One thing I do at my house with my kids, we do a fire drill because we want the kids to know, okay, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're kind of half asleep, half disoriented, you need to know what to do and how to get there.
And the reality is that if something happens and we're not prepared, then from a responder's view, it causes us to use more resources. It causes us to be delayed and sometimes giving assistance to those folks who may need it even more because folks are not prepared to take care of themselves.
The State Department of Health is moving more towards an all hazards preparedness, meaning we're not just talking about public health emergencies. I mean, certainly we are continuing to build on those efforts, but at the same time, I guess being more aware and recognizing our role in supporting other types of disasters like snowstorms and tornadoes and that sort of thing. We have our county partners and we depend on them for public health emergencies, and they should depend on us to help support their efforts as well. And I think that the State Department of Health, in moving to a more all hazards approach, I think it makes perfect sense, and I'm happy to be a part of that effort.
I don't need a plan for a tornado and a plan for an earthquake and a plan for a terrorist attack and a plan for a winter storm. I need one plan that includes the elements from all of those things and allows me to plan, protect, and survive those. So that's what we mean by all hazards planning.
Eventually, I think once those plans become more gelled and we continue to strengthen and work on those relationships with our emergency partners, we're going to be better off for it.
We actually do preparedness drills with Homeland Security. They coordinate it between the police and fire departments, where they'll do mock setups and they'll say, okay, this is a plane crash or a terrorist attack, and they go out and they go through the motions of what they would do in the case that would happen, and we go out and cover those things so we can learn from it.
In many ways, the economic downturn and the struggles that we've faced both at all levels of government, particularly at the local level and the state level, have forced, from a reality standpoint, folks to understand that no longer can we all do everything or can we have everything. So we have to look to one another to see how do we leverage equipment, how do we leverage capabilities, how do we leverage knowledge, how do we leverage personnel. In doing that, we find ourselves building relationships.
Chance of rain with high temperatures near 50. Nobody watches Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune because they want to see Chris Wright talk about a tornado warning. I get it, okay? I get it. Nobody wants us to interrupt the football game, and God forbid in the old days that you interrupt Oprah. But we have to do that because our first mission is to keep people safe. You know, if I could come on the air and tell you anything so that tomorrow you're sitting there with your kids, you say, man, that was a rough storm we went through last night, versus being in a hospital because somebody got hurt, then I've done my job. And that's what we have to do. As soon as we get the information, we go on the air and pass it along. Yes, sometimes we stay on too long, What we're trying to do is make sure everybody gets the word out, because just because you're watching does not mean all of your neighbors are watching. And a lot of times we'll go on the air and we'll be talking about storms coming through and what they're doing in different counties, trying to give people a heads up, and somebody will call somebody a couple of counties over. It's like, it's really stormy over here. Oh, the sun's out over here where it's coming your way. Really? I had no idea because I'm not watching. So what we try and do is make sure we give people enough time to circulate the word to everyone that they know.
Finding leaders, finding folks that can help share that vision in the community, that can help bring folks along to understand that working together does work, and that in terms is really the only answer, that we have to work together, and we can be much better as a team than we can on our own.
Emergency response agencies are critical to ensure our protection before and after a disaster has occurred. But their help is limited, and the role of preparing for a disaster is most critical for one community group, us. It's been estimated that emergency services may not be restored for a period ranging from a few days to several weeks after a major disaster has occurred, which means that we may have to rely on ourselves during that time. What is our role to prepare our families for severe weather, a public health crisis, or a devastating tornado outbreak of epic proportions? As we examine this subject, you can decide where you stand in your level of preparedness in the face of disaster.
Personal preparedness can mean a whole lot of stuff to the individual. It doesn't necessarily mean having a stockpile of food. It goes beyond that. It's even as simple as having a plan if there's a fire in the house or a fire alarm goes off. What do you tell your kids to do? Having a meeting place outside. If for whatever reason a neighborhood has to be evacuated, there's a meeting place and just accountability for everybody in your household. Having a plan for your pets.
The essence of personal preparedness is making sure you do everything you can to have a safe outcome from earthquakes or floods or tornadoes or whatever. You know, make sure you have everything in place so that you have that safe place to go and you have things to do while you're there, that you're just not sitting around thinking this is a waste of time, but you can be patient and wait until it's safe.
Necessarily something, we're not talking zombie apocalypse or end of the world. This could be a tornado, this could be a flood, this could be something like that.
Real life disasters that happen to real people.
Well, I look at preparedness like a musical instrument, I guess is the best way to say it, you know. How would you prepare for a recital if you play a musical instrument? Or how would you prepare for a show if you're putting on a show? You would practice. You know, you would put in the time ahead of time necessary so that you're not stressed out when you get ready to get on stage. And it's the same way with disaster preparedness, especially with your family. You practice the skills, you practice sourcing water, you practice building fires, you practice sheltering, you practice creating non-electric meals. And all of a sudden, that takes a lot of stress out of a real life scenario. I've done this before many times with my family already over the course of the past year or 2 years or a few months.
Well, obviously we need to look at what our real risks are here. And anybody who's lived in Indiana knows that the weather will change, give it 15 minutes.
We have winter storms, ice and snow, and every year we have that situation, and every year people run to the store, and it's a last minute thing, but it is a form of preparedness. I mean, it's last minute, but at least people are thinking, let's get out there and get our stuff before the snow hits and the roads are icy. I think also we've had extreme heat this past summer. We've had extreme cold, and we need to think about what preparedness means for living in this area.
I think there's a fairly significant difference in the rural folks being ready for living without power for a week, let's say, than people in the city, because we've become so dependent on those things.
So if we have an understanding of what those threats are in relation to where we live and our home and where we work, then we can and should understand then how do we prepare ourselves to protect ourselves in terms of what those most likely threats are to our home.
It's a responsible thing to do to be prepared, because that way you aren't adding to the problem, and at the same time you're empowered to do what you need to do to take care of yourself and your family.
Make an emergency supplies kit based on your plan and your strategy. What are you going to need based on your particular family's needs for at least 3 days? How much water are you going to need? How are you going to stay warm? How How are you going to stay cool? What are you going to eat? Do you have the ability to shut off your utilities to prevent further damage? A lot of things are included in that emergency supplies kit. But you may be a young couple that just has had a new family member, a new baby in the family. Your plan may need to change. Maybe you've got a new pet. Your plan may need to change to include the things you're going to need for that pet.
Because the one thing you don't want is to get down to the safe place and have the kids there and your daughter or your son realize my cat or my dog is upstairs. You're not going to calm them down, so that's got to be part of the plan.
We talked about the importance of having a family communications plan. That would be part of your overall plan, but it's something that can be shared easily with others.
On the landline, circuits will get all bogged down, and it will be very difficult for people, for family members elsewhere to call in, because circuits will be all clogged up. So you need to have a family member far away from the community, maybe even out of state, so that you can call them and let them know that everybody's okay, and then they can call the rest of your family.
Because of the additional stress that can be imposed by a disaster, you are more prone to disease. It's easier for you to get sick. So taking care of sanitation, taking care of personal hygiene needs, including those in your emergency supplies kit, having that extra water so you can brush your teeth and wash your hands, or having provisions for those kind of things are important.
We have to take that to our personal lives as well and understand that there are things that we need to do that we can take positive steps to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our loved ones, protect our neighbors, if we just have the right attitude.
In a flu outbreak, for example, a pandemic, or even just the annual visit of the flu that we experience every year, it's important to stay healthy. Going out and maybe stocking up on some of those food and supply items you might need would help limit your exposure to sick people that might be standing at Walmart or Kroger or wherever else you do your shopping.
If you need medications or prescriptions, making sure that stuff that you have enough to get you to sustain you for a little while. I realize sometimes that can be difficult if you're limited, but at least thinking about it is a good place to start. And my other suggestion with that would be involve kids in that planning, in your personal family preparedness, because if you have school-age kids, most likely your kids are going to have a lot of suggestions because they learn about this in school too.
What you have to do with little kids is make it not scary. If you can find any kind of way to make it interesting, almost like it's a game to them, let them know that it's serious and this is something we really need to do, but also let them know, like, if we do this, we don't have to be afraid because this is going to keep us safe. And if you can calm them down, that way they don't grow up with that fear of storms. I hear from a lot of adults who still are just terrified of tornadoes and thunderstorms because they developed that fear as children and never got over it.
It also depends on your family's ability to have a plan. Most people that evacuate have a family to go to or have the financial resources to go further inland and get a hotel or a motel and ride the storm out. Not every American has that ability. Those that tend to shelter are, their family might be a very close-knit group. They don't have relatives out of state. They might not have the financial resources or even a vehicle to evacuate, and those are the ones that we tend to shelter.
Your plan needs to be a little bit flexible. You may have an overall strategy, and your strategy may be, I'm going to hunker down at home. However, a particular emergency may force you to leave your home, so you still have to have at least some thoughts about what do I need to do if I evacuate.
Well, they're polar opposites. Bugging out is the decision to evacuate your home due to an imminent threat. Typically, it's some type of a disaster that struck your region or your immediate area, and if you stay home, you are going to die. So bugging out is evacuating your home in search of a safer destination. Sheltering in place, or often referred to as bugging in, is the exact opposite. You're either trapped in your home or you feel that your best chance of surviving is staying at home. And so in a bug out scenario, you have a backpack, a bug out bag, a 72-hour kit that you throw on your back and run out the door. In a bug in a sheltering in place scenario, you have items in your house, hopefully at least, that's the whole goal, is preparing in advance so that you have shelter, water, fire and food, first aid and self-defense items in your house should you need to fend for yourself for a few days.
When we're faced with those situations, we take time to start processing, oftentimes processing that information and wanting to discount that information leads us to being hurt or injured or even killed because of our inability to process that information.
So our plans and our procedures need to be flexible. We need to be able to know what to do when we need to do it.
Fire, don't mess around. Use items that are going to start when you need a fire. In a disaster scenario, conditions are never ideal. So
personal preparedness comes down to two things. It comes down to physical resources, things that you have around you to use, whether they're in your home or in your bug out bag or on your keychain. So it comes down to things, and then it also comes down to skills. How do you use the resources mentally? How do you use the resources around you to meet basic human survival goals? Because one or another isn't enough. You can have all the skills in the world with no resources and not be able to meet shelter, water, fire, and food needs. Or you can have all the resources in the world and no skills and not be able to meet your core basic survival needs. So you need to have a healthy balance of tools and of practice.
It isn't going to do you any good to sit there and draw a map of your house and, okay, Johnny, this is how you're going to get out of it unless you practice it. Because your doors may not be readily available to exit through. So you need to teach yourself and your kids how to open a window and climb out. You know, what window is it going to be?
So when it comes to kind of prepping your family, both emotionally and from a realistic preparedness standpoint, in my opinion, it's all about drills. You know, it's all about doing mock scenarios where you live out of your bug out bags for a couple of days, you know, where you turn your power off for a weekend, you know, where you practice your communication plans and where you're going to meet at and what roles does each family member play should you have to evacuate your home. You know, who's shutting off the gas, who's shutting off the water, who's grabbing the bug out bags, who's grabbing Fido.
If you look out your window and see something, everybody in your house knows where to go and gets there immediately. You want to make sure you have some food there in case you're there for a while, some water. You want to prepare for fires that happen in the middle of the night, and make sure that you do the fire drill so your kids know, okay, where are the safe places to go. And probably the most important part of the safety plan that most people forget, they forget that at the end of the safety plan, you got to have a place where everybody meets up so we can make sure everybody's okay.
It comes down to one thing. They can do it, they've just never tried it. They've never in their life tried to go a week with no electricity or tried to do things outside of what they're accustomed to. We in America are the minority of people who are dependent in this world. We're a minority when it comes to people dependent on utilities and resources. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of people in other countries, and probably even our own, that are way less dependent on infrastructure.
I had friends who lived down in Miami after Andrew. They didn't have power for 3.5 weeks. 3.5 weeks, no television, no internet, no warm shower, no cold food. I mean, it's a different way of life.
You know, and I don't know that that's something that the average American can even really comprehend. I mean, even working in preparedness, I don't even know that I could comprehend a power outage. I mean, yes, annoyance for an hour or two, even 24 hours is aggravating. But after that, the tolerance for power outage becomes very low, and forget about just the trade issue or getting what I need. It's just uncomfortable, and we Americans don't want to be uncomfortable.
When people go back into the East Coast, this is going to be their Katrina. They're going to be cleaning up for this storm for 10 years. If you go down to the Gulf Coast now and you look at where Katrina and Rita hit back in 2005, there's still debris that hadn't been cleared away. There's still homes that are level. It takes a long time to come back from that. So that's why we always tell people when the storms are coming in, get out.
Please listen to what your state and local officials are saying. When they tell you to evacuate, you need to evacuate. Do not delay.
What we're saying is like, this is so unbelievable, we can't even tell you how important it is for you to move right now. And that's why they did the evacuations over the East Coast, because they're going to measure damage from this storm $10, $20 billion. I mean, it's going to be a generation before the East Coast is back to normal. The best thing as a weather person you can do is go to the damaged site and see it after the fact. When you go there and see the grand scale scope of what people lost, it lets you know how important this job can be, but also it lets you know the next time you got to do that much more to make sure you really get it across to people how serious it is.
The real key here is the more you think through these in advance, the less anxiety you will have, the better your response will be, you'll be safer, and you won't be as worried about the outcome. So it's giving you a mental edge as well as a physical edge in getting through that disaster, whatever it might be.
I always kind of preface when people say, how do I know what disaster to prepare for? You know, there's so many different ones, and I just feel like I can't prepare for them all. You're right, you can't. There is no perfect preparedness plan for imperfect disasters in an imperfect world.
And one thing you have to realize about weather is we can't control it. You have a storm like the one that hit the East Coast, or something like Katrina or Rita, or like a major tornado outbreak. When that comes through and does the damage, all you can do is say, okay, I got to pick up and start over. We got to clean up and then move on.
No matter what the disaster, no matter what the survival scenario, your core basic survival needs will always be the same, just as they were for people thousands of years ago. Shelter, water, fire, food, first aid, and self-defense.
Look out your window. If it looks scary to you, no matter what I say, take cover. Get to your safe place. If you hear sirens in your neighborhood and you look at television and you don't see your county under a warning, take cover, because your county emergency manager can sound the sirens whether the National Weather Service issues a warning or not, based on what they see looking out the window. And that's the most important weather tool of all of them.
That just gets us back to making that decision to be a survivor rather than waiting to be a victim.
Don't wait for the disaster to occur before you start thinking about your emergency preparedness and what your needs are going to be. Emergencies and disasters are going to happen. Some of them may affect us, some of them may affect you and your family. So be prepared. Have a plan, have a kit, stay informed, and most importantly, practice your plan so that everybody's aware of what it is.
Preparedness. It's a word that has embedded itself in our homes in the 21st century. As our nation has experienced epic disasters from terrorism to environmental catastrophes, we have questions that we must ask ourselves. What have we learned since Hurricane Katrina, the H1N1 pandemic, or a multitude of other disasters? How do we, as a community, band together to prepare for local catastrophes? Have we prepared our families, both physically and emotionally, should the worst occur? The questions are there. The answers are being found, and the choice is yours. Thank you for watching Health Watch. I'm Dave Snow, and remember to plan, prepare, and protect, because better health means a better you.